It is now time to turn our attention over to the markets. This week we have a special report from Rural Radio Network's Rebel Sjeklocha. She's down at this year's Cattle Convention and NCBA trade show taking place in San Antonio.
We're here at the 2025 edition of Cattle Industry Convention here in San Antonio, and joining me now is Shaylee Stewart, livestock market analyst with DTN. Shaylee, there's a lot of excitement up and down the halls with the beef markets as they are, but give us an overview. I know the last week there's been a lot of different highs and lows. What has been impacting that?
You know, really, Rebel, there's been so many things that have came to play. We've had a historic market week after week after week. As we've been early trudging through 2025, the market has eclipsed and reached new highs week in and week out. Whether you look at the feeder cattle complex or the fed cattle market, we've seen record-breaking highs. But this past week, the market has been troubled a little bit because of a few onsets of news headlines over the weekend. Whether it be conversations regarding tariffs or the announcement that Mexican feeder cattle, or I should say cattle in general, imports out of Mexico will resume any day now, there's been challenges to the marketplace. And so yes, that has obviously pressured the complex to some degree, and there's been a little bit of a hurdle, a little bit of a setback, but really the underpinnings of the market are still very strong, very bullish, and cattle producers are most likely going to continue to see a fruitful 2025, most likely well into 2026 as well.
Absolutely. Well, breaking down those factors just a little bit further, with cattle imports resuming from Mexico, what will that factor in particular, how will that play out for producers?
You know, really that's a question that's going to revolve so much around timing, because we know that the USDA and APHIS agree that the imports are going to start any day now, but there's a couple factors that we don't know. We don't know exactly what day in which the cattle are going to begin imported again into the United States, and we don't know the timing of that degree. So we've had the last 2 months in which cattle imports out of Mexico have completely been halted because of the New World Screwer. But we don't know if those cattle are going to be trickled into the market in a meticulous, really just kind of slow, mundane pace, or if they're going to show up all at once. Obviously, if the cattle show up all at once, we're going to most likely see pressure in the feeder cattle side of things. But if they're trickled into the complex on a timely, methodical nature, the pressure won't likely be assumed, and they're going to be well received by buyers because we simply don't have the supplies of which they need to keep up with demand.
Absolutely. Well, tariffs have been the big bad word over the last few months, but how could the threat of tariffs or tariffs, if implemented, impact the cattle market?
You know, tariffs are a big thing because we rely heavily on demand from both Canada and Mexico. Thankfully, from the beef side of things, we've already seen Trudeau come out and say that beef will not be one of the things that he intends to tariff. And thankfully, President Trump has been able to communicate with Mexico's president as well. And as they're our biggest market for the lean hog imports from the United States into Mexico, that market is very essential. And so thankfully here on Wednesday today, we've already seen the cattle complex and the lean hog market find stability and security in the marketplace because of the development. So one thing that I think that we need to remember is that the markets are people, and people like to react emotionally. And so even though we might see headlines pop out and news break out, and we might see these markets be challenged for a day or two, and they do have challenges that are underpinning to the marketplace, we need to also remember that these are tactics in trade and negotiation. And so even though we might see one day of hardship or one day in where prices are pressured, overall, we need to remember the grand scheme of things, and that even bullish markets have weaker days. And so we need to keep a long-term perspective in check and remind ourselves that just because the market trades lower on a daily basis or for a day's basis, that doesn't mean that we're seeing a shift in the market as a whole.
Certainly. Well, morale is high in the hallways with producers from across the country gathering, and many of them just selling their calf crop for the year. But as you mentioned, that emotional component, what kind of mindset should producers have as they look towards 2025 and beyond?
I'm really glad that you asked that question because so many people like to correlate the 2025 cattle market to that of what we saw in 2014 and 2015 because we like to relate things back to history, right? But this market is much different than what we saw in 2014 and 2015. I do not believe our build back is going to be as rapid or the same as what we saw in 2014 and 2015. And there are still a lot of challenges that cattlemen are faced with today. Obviously, interest rates are still really expensive. Input costs are still really high. We have drought as a lingering factor in the marketplace. So while prices are high and very lucrative to producers on the grassroots level, they're being very cautious. We just had the cattle inventory report come out last week, and we did not see, whether you looked at the beef cow inventory from a mature herd standpoint, or you looked at the retention of beef replacement females, we have not yet seen any indication that growth has begun to resume. And so I really think that producers are being keen and waiting because they need to see more reassurance in the marketplace that they're going to continue to see that money trickle down into the grassroots level. So I really believe that the optimism, the enthusiasm, the excitement is going to continue well through 2025 into 2026 because of the two factors of supply and demand. We have a limited supply. Thankfully, we have exuberant demand, strong demand from both consumers here domestically and abroad. And so the market should continue to be robust.
Absolutely. Well, there's so many wonderful sessions that producers can attend here at CattleCon and get a wealth of information. But you obviously have the cattle producer standpoint and then also, the market analyst side of things as well. What are some things that you have taken from CattleCon this year that you'd like people at home who are probably somewhere much, much cooler, maybe breaking ice, not at CattleCon? What would you like them to know?
Really, I want them to know that this is their marketplace and that they are empowered to make the decisions they need to make. And so I think that you brought up a really good question earlier. We did see some pressure in the complex earlier this week, but yet we're still talking about a bullish market. And so what I would like to encourage producers is to remember that you are in the driver's seat of your market and that there are ways that you can mitigate some risk and that your cattle are an asset until the day in which you liquidate them and sell them. And so if you're feeling pressured, if you're feeling anguish about the market and it's just simply something that's too overwhelming, remember that the market is people. The cattle market, the greater market as a whole, are comprised of people, and people are emotional. And so if things start to run too fast, trade too fast, and things get overwhelming, sometimes it's better if we just step back for a second, relook at the market from a 10,000-foot view, and decide to really just reanalyze where things sit. And like I said earlier, your cattle are an asset until the point in which you liquidate them. And so I just encourage producers to remember that and think about that moving forward if things start to get a little bit fast-paced.
Awesome. Well, Shaylee, great analysis. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rebel.
Once again, that's Shaylee Stewart, livestock market analyst at DTN. We are here in San Antonio at CattleCon 2025.